up on this Friday edition of Newsline at noon, Korea decides to join the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, opening doors for Korean companies to take part in major infrastructure projects in the region. The top U.S. military officer, General Martin Dempsey, meets with his South Korean military counterpart Choi Yoon-hee in Seoul. Attention is being drawn to whether the possible deployment of a U.S. missile defense system was on their agenda. Plus, findings show the co-pilot of the ill-fated Germanwings flight deliberately crashed the plane into the French Alps after locking the pilot out of the cockpit. These stories and more on Newsline at noon. It's noon Friday, March 27th here in Korea. Thanks for tuning in. Live from Seoul, I'm Eoh Jin-joo.
It's very good to have you with us. I'm Mark Broome. We're going to start this afternoon with the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey. He is locked in talks today with senior South Korean military and defense officials in Seoul.
The top U.S. military officer is currently at South Korea's Joint Chiefs of Staff, where he has been discussing security matters with his South Korean counterpart, Choi Yoon-hee.
For more details, we connect live to Kim Hyun-bin at the Ministry of National Defense in Seoul. Hyun-bin.
Hey guys, General Dempsey has been in talks with Choi Yoon-hee this morning, but as of yet, we don't have further information on what they discussed. But however, prior to the meeting, Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff said the agenda will focus on pending issues, such as North Korea's increasing nuclear and missile threat, and the transfer of wartime operations control from Washington to Seoul. Now, Dempsey is due to meet with South Korea's Defense Minister Han Min-koo after lunch at around 1:30 p.m., so around 90 minutes from now.
So, Hyun-bin, there's been a lot of talk that the two military chiefs would have discussed the possible deployment of a U.S. missile defense system called THAAD to the Korean Peninsula. Any updates on that?
Well, defense ministry officials here have been stressing that the issue is not on the agenda, but it may have come up in passing, so hopefully we'll have some more information in the coming hours. But earlier this week, before heading to Japan, the first stop of his Asian tour, Dempsey said one of the key topics on the agenda in Seoul is building an integrated air and missile defense system. Now, many people took that to mean that he wanted to discuss the possible deployment of THAAD to the Korean Peninsula. Now, numerous current and former U.S. officials and experts are pushing for the deployment of THAAD to South Korea. Now, they say it would deter North Korean missile and nuclear threats and better ensure the safety of around 28,000 American troops stationed here.
And Hyun-bin, the U.S. says the THAAD deployment is strictly aimed at better countering North Korea's missile and nuclear threats. If that's the case, why are regional powers such as China and Russia so strongly against the move, and what are South Korea's concerns?
Well, South Koreans are playing cards close to their chest because China and Russia are strongly against the deployment. Now, you can understand their concerns as it would set up a U.S. nuclear and missile umbrella that will be able to shoot down missiles from anywhere in the region. Now, additionally, THAAD's radar system, which has a range of up to 2,000 kilometers, will be able to monitor large parts of the Chinese mainland. Now, South Korea's main concern may be the sheer cost of this system. Now, THAAD is a multi-billion-dollar defense system, and Seoul is unwilling to shoulder the cost of having it here, and especially as it's developing its own missile defense system called the Korea Air and Missile Defense. Now, that's all I have at the moment, but I'll bring you more updates on Dempsey's visit throughout the day.
Thank you, Kevin, for that. And moving on, after weeks and weeks of will it or will it not, Korea has finally announced that it will take part in a new China-led Regional Development Bank as a founding member. The country's participation is likely to open up immense business opportunities for local companies and infrastructure building projects in Asia, while strengthening economic ties with China. Hung Jie reports.
The South Korean government says it will join the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank that aims to provide regional economies with the necessary funds for large-scale development projects. And the decision is forecast to largely benefit local construction and telecommunications companies.
The bank will spur a huge demand for infrastructure work in Asia that local companies with extensive experience in construction, telecommunication, and transportation can jump into to meet the demand.
While membership of the AIIB is also expected to enhance South Korea's economic ties with China, many agree it will help Seoul by providing massive amount of funds critical to develop North Korea in case of unification.
South Korea could take a lead in developing the Northeast Asian region, including North Korea, by participating in the AIIB.
Given that this announcement only marks the beginning of this process, attention is focused on how South Korea can secure voting rights that will decide its role in the bank. As Seoul's finance ministry assured that it will do its best to maximize national interest, it added that China is unlikely to get 50% of the voting rights. That due to more than 30 countries deciding to join the bank and more expected to do so. Participants have agreed that voting rights will match with the contributions made, with Asian countries having 75% of the rights. Korea stands as the third largest economy by size after China and India among the Asian nations, but the ministry said it couldn't assure its voting rights will also be the third largest, as many other factors may play a part. Once South Korea is confirmed as a founding member and signs up around June this year, the National Assembly is expected to swiftly ratify the move. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
So how will Korea's decision to join the AIIB as a founding member influence its diplomatic position, teetering between China and the United States? Our Hwang Sang-hee tells us how the decision might possibly speed up talks on the deployment of a controversial U.S. missile defense system to the Korean peninsula.
Previously, Washington had expressed concerns about the timing of Korea joining the China-led Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank as a founding member.
So every government can make its own decision about whether the way to achieve that goal is by joining before the Articles of Agreement are clarified, or by waiting to see what the evidence looks like as the bank starts to operate.
The U.S. State Department reiterated its stance on Thursday, saying it's up to each country to join the new financial institution. Washington took issue with the transparency of the AIIB, saying it must meet the standards of other multilateral development banks. An official at Seoul's foreign ministry said Korea consulted with the U.S. on the matter leading up to its decision. He also said Beijing pushed hard for Seoul to join the AIIB as a founding member, bringing up the issue at every round of high-level talks between the two countries. Pundits say now could be the time to start official talks between Seoul and Washington on the possible deployment of the Terminal High Altitude Area Defense Battery, also known as THAAD in South Korea. Since Korea sided with China on the AIIB issue, they say it will have to consider the U.S. position on the controversy between its two closest partners. Hwang Sang-hee, Arirang News.
North Korea claims to have arrested 2 South Korean spies who it says worked for Seoul's National Intelligence Service from the Chinese border city of Dandong. The North state-run Korean Central News Agency reported late Thursday that the men, identified as Kim Guk-gi and Choi Chung-gil, are being held on charges related to terrorism and bringing in large quantities of counterfeit money. It added that Choi was arrested last December while Kim was captured in Pyongyang last September. The South's Unification Ministry says it's looking into the claims. An arsonist's attempt to set fire to the Korean Cultural Center in Tokyo may ignite existing tensions between Korea and Japan. Seoul has requested a swift investigation into the incident. Kim Min-ji reports.
CCTV footage showed a masked person pouring lighter fluid on the outer wall of the Korean Cultural Center and setting it on fire around midnight on Wednesday. The unidentified person soon fled the scene. There were no casualties or significant damage to the property except for soot marks on the wall near the center's entrance. The Korean government has expressed dismay over the attempted arson. Officials have called on Japan's foreign ministry to heighten security in the area and asked for a prompt investigation. This is not the first arson attempt on Korean property in Japan. Back in 2013, a man threw signal flares at the Korean consulate general in Kobe. The incident occurred while anti-Korean sentiment was strong following then-President Lee Myung-bak's visit to Dokdo Island in 2012. The motive for the latest arson is still unknown, but Japanese police believe similar negative feelings may have influenced the suspect. This year marks the 50th anniversary of normalization of diplomatic ties between Japan and Korea, but bilateral relations have been thorny, particularly in regards to Japan's interpretation of World War II history. Despite repeated calls for an acknowledgement of the country's wartime atrocities, many feel the Abe administration has yet to show sincere remorse. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
Staying with Japan's Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, he's been confirmed to address both houses of the US Congress when he visits Washington next month. Abe would be the first Japanese leader to be given the relatively rare platform. Japan's neighbours hope he will address his country's past wrongdoings during his speech. Connie Kim reports.
John Boehner, Speaker of the U.S. House of Representatives, says Abe's address on April 29th will be an opportunity to hear ways to expand economic and security cooperation from a close ally. During his 8-day trip to the U.S. next month, Abe is expected to promote his efforts to revise Japan's pacifist constitution and give his country the right to collective self-defense. In other words, allow Japan to come to the military aid of allies if they come under attack. U.S. officials are hoping to see a breakthrough in trade talks with Japan, in particular in relation to the massive Trans-Pacific Partnership Pact. In Korea, eyes are focused on whether Abe will show remorse for Japan's wartime atrocities during his speech to Congress. The offer to Abe came despite strong efforts by Korean-American organizations to stop him. There are concerns Abe would use the podium to promote Japan as a peace-loving nation since the end of World War II, without mentioning the atrocities it committed during the war. The Abe administration continues to deny state responsibility for the country's past wrongdoings. Korea was a victim of Japan's wartime aggression. It's estimated that some 200,000 women, most of whom are from Korea, were mobilized for work in military brothels during the war. Connie Kim, Arirang News. With by-elections about a month away, Korea's rival parties are gearing up for tight races in a total of 4 constituencies. Now, the April by-elections are seen as a crucial litmus test for the ruling party ahead of next year's general elections. And today, both party leaders made their way to the city of Seongnam in Korea's central Gyeonggi-do province. Park Ji-man tells us more.
The ruling Saenuri Party is in Seongnam to hold a training program for hundreds of regional party members this afternoon. Key members of the party leadership, including leader Kim Moo-sung and Supreme Council members, will attend the program and provide special lectures and education to strengthen the Conservative Party's grip on the region. The main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy is also trying to make an impact in the area, holding its Supreme Council meeting there earlier today. After the morning meeting, Liberal Party leader Moon Jae-in reached out to voter groups, visiting a community welfare center and the region's textile industry association. 4 constituencies are up for grabs in next month's by-elections, 1 each in Seongnam, Seoul, Incheon, and southwestern city of Gwangju. 3 of the vacant seats are due to a dissolution of the far-left Unified Progressive Party late last year for its pro-North Korea party doctrine and activities. The remaining seat was vacated by a Saenuri Party lawmaker who lost his status due to a jail sentence. This by-election is significant for both parties. The ruling Conservative Party holds a majority in the assembly, so next month's vote will function as a test for next year's general elections and serve as a public evaluation of the incumbent administration. For the main opposition, it's a chance to get a reading on public support for the party's new leadership under Chairman Moon Jae-in, who took the reins in March. The by-elections will be held on April 29th. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye has sanctioned a controversial anti-corruption bill. Now, with the president's approval, the law will be proclaimed on this Friday and enforced starting September 2016 after an 18-month grace period. Under the bill, public servants, members of the media, and private education workers will face criminal charges if they or their spouses are found to have accepted $900 or more in money or gifts from a person, regardless of whether it was in exchange for favors or work-related. Critics of the bill say, however, it could violate a person's constitutional rights and infringe on freedom of the press and rights to equality.
More and more Korean businesses are looking to Latin America for expansion and growth. Companies from both regions are attending this year's Inter-American Development Bank meeting, which kicked off in Korea's southern port city of Busan on this Friday. The annual gathering aims to boost cooperation between Asian and Latin American economies, creating opportunities for Korean entrepreneurs to try out new markets. Shinzo Abe reports from Busan.
This local steel product manufacturing company says its business has been hurting. Supplying the shipbuilding and heavy machinery industries has become a lot more complicated.
Cheaper Chinese ships fueling the global market have made supplying the naval industry more competitive, but opportunities like this could help my company expand in the Latin American region.
Eun is one of the 3,000-plus participants from a total of 48 member nations gathered at the annual Inter-American Development Bank meeting in Busan. Through one-on-one summits, entrepreneurs are making valuable connections and exchanging business practices.
So it's a very vibrant relationship, and also it's quite a high value-added relationship in terms of Korea. The Korean companies are investing and are producing some of the most sophisticated products in the world.
Trade volume with Latin American countries more than doubled last year to $54.2 billion, up from a mere $2.2 when Korea first joined the AIIB. Direct investment to the region also rose sixfold to $35 billion.
The Latin American market is one that many Korean companies have yet to tackle. Countries there are rich in resources with an annual 6% growth rate. It's the next target market for many Korean businesses, both large and mid-sized.
Although the deals being signed here aren't huge figures yet, the local trade agency believes that it is a progressive first step for many SMEs expanding out to the global market, especially creating trust-building opportunities between the nations. Shinzo Abe, Arirang News, Busan.
Korea's free trade deal with the European Union has vastly improved the economic bloc's trade balance with Korea. An EU report shows that its exports to Korea jumped by 35%, entering the third year of the FTA from the year before the deal took effect in July 2011. Over the same period, Korea's exports to the EU, though, basically remained the same. As a result, the EU's trade balance with Korea has flipped from an $8.2 billion deficit pre-FTA to a $3.8 billion surplus. Time now for a look through the global headlines we're following on this Friday lunchtime in Seoul. For that, we turn to Eunice Kim, standing by at the News Center.
Eunice, there's been a critical turn in the investigation into the Germanwings Flight 9525 crash. Its co-pilot is now being considered as a possible culprit.
That's right, Jin-joo, and this is following a report that someone at the helm had reprogrammed the autopilot to crash the plane on purpose. This as earlier French prosecutor had said the co-pilot had deliberately blocked the pilot from the cockpit, citing audio data from that retrieved black box. Kwon So-ah has the latest for us.
The mystery of the Germanwings plane crash could soon be solved. But the more we learn, the harder it becomes to comprehend. Investigators are now saying the co-pilot intentionally put the plane carrying 150 people on a crash course into the French Alps. Data by an aviation tracking website shows that someone in the cockpit reprogrammed the plane's autopilot from 38,000 feet to below 100 feet. That someone appears to be 27-year-old Andreas Lubitz, who apparently was alone in the cockpit before the crash.
The most plausible, realistic interpretation, as far as we are concerned, is that the co-pilot, through voluntary abstention, refused to open the door of the cabin for the captain, and then pressed the button which caused the aircraft to lose altitude.
Today, news reached us that this tragedy had gained a new, utterly incomprehensible dimension.
A possible motive surrounds the co-pilot's psychological state, as he was said to have interrupted his flying training for some months. But afterwards, he passed all the tests, including medical checks. Psychotherapists say his act must have been planned down to the smallest detail. In fact, investigations point to the fact that Lubitz was breathing steadily before the crash. So far, officials say there is no indication it was a terror act. People who knew Lubitz say he was an ordinary person whose longtime dream was to become a pilot.
I cannot imagine that he has done it with intention. This does not fit in this picture I have from him.
Many airlines have responded quickly to the tragedy, introducing strict two-person cockpit rules.
Currently, there is not the requirement to have two members in the cabin. After this order, there will be a requirement to have two members in the cabin.
Back in the Alps, where recovery efforts are continuing in harsh conditions, special flights and buses are taking the families of the victims as close as possible to their loved ones. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
And concern is growing in the Middle East after Saudi Arabia and its coalition of allies launched a surprise aerial campaign overnight against targets of Houthi rebels overtaking the poor Arab nation. Civilians were seen picking up the pieces and surveying the damage when dawn broke. Reports say at least 18 civilians, including 6 children, were killed in the military operation. In a televised speech, rebel leader Abdul Malik al-Houthi promised to push back against what he called a criminal campaign. Iran, believed to be supporting the Houthis, said it considered the act a dangerous step. Finally, what makes a great leader? According to Fortune magazine, in this interconnected world, it's no longer about being in a position of power and more about earning that leadership every day. Featured in its second annual list of the world's greatest leaders are familiar faces like social media savvy pop star Taylor Swift, China's leader Xi Jinping, and Pope Francis. Rounding out the top 10 was 17-year-old Joshua Wong, the face of last year's Hong Kong democracy movement. And topping the list was Apple CEO Tim Cook, whom the magazine gave credit for not only making the tech giant the world's most profitable company, but also for finding his own voice out of the shadow of the company's founder, Steve Jobs.
We have all marathon, just in case that.
It will be warmer today. The high in Seoul will reach the upper teens, and the southern provinces will see highs into the 20s. But we've been experiencing wide temperature fluctuations these days, so be sure to dress accordingly. With April just around the corner, spring flowers finally started to bloom in the capital area. And other than dryness, we have clean air to breathe in, and the sun is shining down. So the whole peninsula will enjoy beautiful last Friday of March today. On that note, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. The daytime high here in Seoul will soar to 17, while Daegu and Gwangju will peak at 21 and 20, and Busan will rise to 16 this afternoon. And as for the other regions, Jeju Island and Dokdo should see a high of 16, while Daejeon tops out at 18. Now we have light rain in the forecast for tomorrow night, starting at about 9 p.m. in Seoul and the surrounding areas, and it's likely to linger till Sunday early morning, but we are expecting less than 5 millimeters precipitation. That's all for Korea, and here's international weather for viewers around the world.
And this is where we say goodbye on this Friday afternoon.
Have a wonderful weekend. And if you can, join Jin-joo and I at the same time on Monday. Until then, goodbye.